In this video, I'm gonna let you in on my secret formula to portrait photography. I love taking portraits with a beautiful blurry background. So today I'm gonna show you exactly how to do that. And you might not believe it, but you can actually get the camera to do most of the work for you, which is amazing. At the end of this video, you'll easily be able to create a beautiful portrait of your own, just like this one. So maybe you've bought a beautiful new camera that you were super excited about. You went out and took some photos of your friends and family only to be super disappointed. But maybe you just don't know how to use your camera to get the results that you want. And that's okay, we've all been there. We've all picked up a camera for the first time and just been like, oh my gosh, this has so many buttons and settings and there's so many different lenses out there, like which is the right one for me? That was me at one point. But after getting a diploma in photography and being an Air Force photographer for over 12 years, I have taken a lot of portraits. In the Air Force, I took a lot of portraits of people doing their job. I have my own go-to system now for the standard kind of portrait that I love to take. So today we'll cover my formula that works every time and all the gear, settings, editing, everything that you need to know to create your perfect portrait. So the gear is pretty simple. All we're going to need today is your camera and a lens. And probably the lens that you've got right now will be absolutely fine unless it's a super wide fisheye or something that's going to create a lot of distortion in the person's face. Then probably what you've got is fine. I usually like to shoot with a focal length between like 50 millimeters and 100 millimeters. So if you've got a lens that is a 24 to 70 or a 24 to 50 or a 24 to 105 or even say like a 50 to 200 or 70 to 200, any of those lenses are going to be absolutely fine for shooting a portrait. So you probably don't need to go out and buy any new gear. All you probably need is the camera that you've got and the lens that you've got. Now let's talk about the lighting. I love to have a beautiful soft lighting on my portraits most of the time, unless I'm doing something creative. And when I'm talking soft lighting, I'm meaning lighting that doesn't create harsh shadows on a person's face. So the lighting that you see now, I would call this soft lighting. So how do you get soft lighting? Well, there are 3 different ways that you could get beautiful soft lighting in your photos. If you're going to shoot inside, then I would just get your subject near a window where just the natural light can fall on their face, as long as it's not direct sunlight coming in. I'm inside right now, kind of in front of a couple of windows, and I feel like the lighting here on my face is absolutely perfect. The next option is if you want to shoot outside, then you don't want to be shooting in the harsh sunlight. You want that nice soft light. So we kind of want to avoid the sun altogether. Either want to be shooting outside on an overcast day, then you can shoot anywhere you want because the clouds are going to soften that light. They're going to act like a big diffuser and just diffuse that light and make it beautiful and soft so there's no harsh shadows on the face. The other option, if it's a really beautiful sunny day, is find a nice shady place. Make sure your whole photo is going to be in the shade, so it's not just the person's under a tree in the shade and the background is really bright, because then your background is going to be really overexposed. So find a nice shady spot where the person and the background are in shade and take your photo there. So then we get to the settings, and this is maybe the part that people complicate way too much. And when I'm thinking about my settings, I really just want to think about my aperture for portraits, because the person's not moving, so I don't need a fast shutter speed. So I'm going to put my camera on aperture priority. So depending on your camera, aperture priority could be A, it could be AV. It usually starts with an A. Now that you've set your camera to aperture priority, we want to set the aperture on the camera. So for the perfect amount of blur in the background and to keep the person's face sharp so they're not going to have like sharp eyes and then a blurry tip of their nose, we're going to set the camera to f4. Now if your camera doesn't go down to f4, you can set it at 5.6 if that's as low as you can go, or even f11 if that's the lowest you can go to. But if you're at f11, you might just have to zoom into 100 millimeters on your lens to get a bit more blur in the background. Changing the aperture is what creates more or less blur in the background. And if we're at, say, f1.8, a really small number, it's going to be really blurry. If we're at f22, then it's not going to be blurry at all in most cases. So we're going to go for f4. It's still quite a low number, but it's not so low that some of the face is going to end up blurred. And just so there's less to worry about, go ahead and set your ISO to auto. Then you don't have to worry about setting the ISO either. The camera will do all of that for you. And as long as you're in a well-lit room, you're not going to get a really high ISO where the picture's going to look really noisy or grainy. Make sure you're shooting in RAW so you can get the most detail as possible, and this will really help with your editing later. Look at your lens, turn it around to set it to between 50 and 100 millimeters, and position your person somewhere with a nice background. You don't want anything too distracting in the background, any like really bright objects that are gonna distract the viewer from the actual picture of the person you're going to look at. Just something that is pretty plain, maybe some trees or something, because we're going to make it nice and blurry in the background anyway. Next, you want to get down or up to their level. So if they're a tall person, you don't want to be looking up their nose. So get a little stool or something so you can get to their level. If it is a child or a shorter person, then you can just crouch down to their level so you're not looking down at them, unless that's the kind of look that you want the little kid looking up to you. Usually I want to get right down to their level so I can look straight into their eyes. Now the eyes are the most important thing to be sharp in the photo. You don't want to focus on the tip of the nose and then the eyes are really blurry, because that looks really weird, trust me. So if you have it on your camera, I highly recommend using the eye focusing mode, or else just try and move your little auto-focusing dot to where the person's eye is and focus on that. If you want to learn more about focusing, I will add a video up here all about focusing in different focusing modes so you can get perfectly sharp photos every time. So now you're ready to take a photo. So what I do now is I just take a few shots. It might take a little while for the person to relax. That's okay, that always happens. Just keep shooting until they relax pretty much. So take a few shots, talk to them while you're shooting, tell them what you're doing, and ask them to move around in different positions. Take a couple of them looking straight at you, a couple with their shoulder pointing towards you but their face still looking towards you. Just get them to move around a bit, tell some jokes maybe, make them laugh, just help them to relax, and just take a good number of shots so you can just play around with different positions and different facial expressions. And remember, don't keep it all to yourself. The person who you're taking photos of wants to see what you're shooting as well. So like take a few little breaks and stop and show them what you've taken. They will totally love that, and then you'll probably get more photos out of them. Now we're ready to edit. So I use Adobe Lightroom to do the basic editing of my portraits, and today I'm going to show you exactly how I would do that in Lightroom. Okay, so after I have downloaded my files into a folder on my desktop, I go in here, local, and I will find the folder on my desktop. These are some photos I did recently to Kiwi Maya. But this time we're going to look at some photos I've got in the cloud that I took a while ago of my two kids in the bush or the forest. And you'll notice it's actually quite dark. I didn't expose it super well, but I would rather expose it a little bit darker than too bright and lose the detail and the highlights here on top of their heads. So what I usually start with is the exposure, because it's quite dark, and I'll bring that up to where I think the skin tones look quite good. You'll notice I'm losing some detail here in the highlights now, but that's okay because we have that detail, so I can bring that back by bringing the highlights back down here. Now usually the next thing I do is look at the color temperature down here and the tint, and I think this looks quite green, and it's probably because we were in the bush and a lot of green light was reflecting off them. So I'm going to just try and add a little bit of magenta, because that's the opposite of green, and just see what that looks like. Quite like that, and it's quite a cool tone. You can see it's quite blue, so I might just warm it up a little bit of yellow in there. I'm quite liking the way that looks. I might just crop it a little tighter though, before I do any more on it. Usually I'll just press C on my keyboard to do that, but you can also click up here to crop, and then it will come up with this crop matrix, and you can just drag the edge there. So I'm going to center it about there. Press return or enter. Okay, now I'm going to play with the blacks and whites a little bit. Sometimes if there's quite a bit of shadow, which you shouldn't have if you used the technique that I taught you, so that you get nice soft lighting. This is in the shade in the bush, but there is still a little bit of you can see there's some light patches in their face where there's more light falling, but that's okay. It's not like there's no super harsh shadows, but I could just fill those shadows in a little bit by doing this, but because they're not like super obvious, it's actually not really doing much. I'd probably have to brighten up my exposure a little bit more and bring the highlights down a little bit more. I just don't like getting the highlights too close to like the very edge. Okay, so that's looking alright. Now I'm going to play with the blacks just to add a little bit more contrast and depth in there. I'm thinking that looks quite good like that. Maybe take out a little bit more green. Yeah, if you want to get creative with your colors and stuff, that's another lesson, but I mean, you can create a really unique look if you want, or you can even play around with some of these presets up here. So I'd go to recommended or premium. If you go to premium, you can actually choose different types of portraits. You can see if I go gritty portrait, didn't actually really do much. Anyway, you can have a play around with those presets. They're just up here, and I can collapse that away again if I click that. So I'm pretty happy with that how it is. The last thing I'll do is go down to the very bottom in detail, and then go to sharpening and just drag that up probably to about halfway. And there you go. If you did want to make it black and white, you can take the saturation right down, which is, I actually quite like it in black and white, but then you can play around with, you know, the blacks and the whites and everything while it's desaturated with black and white. If you want to take that back to where it was, you can double click it and we'll go back to where it was. Sometimes actually I like to add in a little bit of vibrance as well, just if I want a bit more punch in the colours, but I don't want to make it look too unnatural. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that is looking. So now I'm going to export it by going up here, because this is a raw file, so it's pretty hard to share that with anyone. I mean, you can't print a raw file as a raw file, you can't upload it to your website or social media or whatever, so you have to export it as a JPEG usually. So I'm going to go up here and click this square with an arrow going up, or a rectangle, and then I'm going to go down to JPEG Large, and then I'll export it to that folder. You can choose whichever folder you want, and there you go. So then I'll go out of Lightroom and go and find it in that folder that I just saved it to. And now you should have a shot that has the eyes of the person and most of their face perfectly sharp, and a nice amount of blur or bokeh in the background. Now that you've nailed it, it's time to start exploring different compositions. And if you don't know what I mean by that, or you're just not sure where to start, check out this video right here where I give you my 5 simple steps to mastering composition that will really take your photos to the next level. So go ahead and click that video above on how to master your composition. Remember, photography is all about baby steps and just taking it step by step, learning one little thing at a time and building on your knowledge, and that's how you become a really great photographer. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see your results.